right, so when you're done creating your car file, remember that you'll have the FLA file, which is the file that you open in Flash, and then you have that Swift file, and you can see other students have already uploaded their files here. So you would just go into your discussion, you would hit create a thread, you can name, when you hit create a thread, here I'll even demo how to do it, you could put, the name of your car file. Okay. Your name will automatically pop up next to your thread. You could put some instructions here if you needed to put instructions. You go to where you've saved your files and you'll upload the Swift file here. So the SWF is called your Swift file. That's your runnable. You hit post or submit. And you'll see your car pop up here. So then other students have uploaded their cars. And when everybody gets their car uploaded, or you can even look now inside of here, when you click on their thread, you'll see their Swift file. You'll click on the Swift file, it opens, actually full screen. And then you could look at each other's cars. And as promised, I'm going to put a survey in here, and we can vote on our favorite cars. But I'm going to wait until everybody gets their car uploaded to do that. Okay, so you can wait on looking at everybody's if you wanted to, or start looking at people's cars. And we're not going to do more with the car formally as a lecture, okay? But for your final project, if you wanted to take this car project and do more with it, this could count as your final project, because you could actually take this car project and do a lot more. You could even make it into a game if you wanted to, okay? If you just kept running it and had obstacles come, you could make it jump obstacles. And, by the end of this class, you should be able to think how to make a game out of this car. So we're going to stop working with it formally in class, but you do have it completed. All right? And so the next project we're going to work on together is we're going to work on making a pizza maker app. It's just kind of a fun project, and it's going to help teach us how to use some functions, okay, and how to work with functions again and branching. And so in your class assignments, you go to your class assignments, I did give you a starter file, a starter flaw that has a couple of things inside of it. So if you download or click on this file, it'll download. I've learned that don't use Internet Explorer when you're downloading flaw files from Blackboard. Internet Explorer kind of ruins the flaw files when you download them. So use Firefox or Chrome. Open up Blackboard in Firefox or Chrome and then download this flaw file. And then I have videos that I have previously made at this link. Okay, so if you fall behind today or you want to look at them again, the videos are there, which is helpful. I didn't copy and paste them in here because, embed them, but you could follow the link there. And when you open up your flaw file, I'll wait a couple seconds for everybody to get it open. But it's just a blank stage, but we do have some things in the library. You can check them out. Okay, we have a couple of PNGs or PNG files. And then we have one movie clip object, you can tell by the icon there, of a pan object. And let me just go ahead and show you what this pizza maker is supposed to do. I think we've seen the pizza maker before. I think I showed you an example of our pizza maker. But let's just look. We'll look at our previous spring semester, where we made some pizza makers. So in your pizza maker, we're going to have some buttons here. And then you'll have your pizza ready to be made. And then when you click on the buttons, it'll make the ingredients fly into the pizza and be added to your pizza. Okay. And then, yeah, yeah. All right. So it's just kind of, a silly little pizza maker app, but we are going to learn some cool programming concepts. And this one, too, you could take it further and do other things with it. Okay. But we'll learn some important things about programming making it. All right. So does everybody have their FLA file open? Okay, first things first, go ahead and save it. If you haven't saved it, save it somewhere where you know where it's at, because it might be in the downloads folder or in a temporary location. So go to your documents or into your USB drive, wherever you're saving your files. And it did download with the little parenthesis 1 parenthesis, so I'm going to get rid of that and just call it Pizza Maker. Okay, I'm going to assume everybody's kind of with me. All right. So our steps today is we're going to just kind of decorate the background. We're going to add a pizza, or the pan. We're going to make a pizza dough on top of it. And then we'll add one of our ingredients and make it fly in with a button. So we're going to add one, probably get to one ingredient today, and then you guys can start on the next ingredients. Okay? So let's put our tablecloth down. So I went ahead and I just clicked on the tablecloth ping or PNG. I dragged it over to the stage. And actually, one second, let's make our stage a little bit bigger. And last time we made our stage the correct size for those E-pads. And what length was our stage last time? It wasn't the 550 by 400. It was the 800 by 480. So click anywhere in the gray part to click off your stage, and then you'll see the properties for your stage. And we'll change the size of our stage to 800 by 480, and then it'll look better on our E-pads. Now, of course, if you wanted to make it a different size for a different device, you could do that now. I don't mind which size you want, but if you wanted to test it on the E-pads and it to look nice, this is a good size for them. Okay? All right. So now let's make our tablecloth the correct size. So if you click on your tablecloth, you'll see its properties, of course, in the Properties panel. And you can change his X and Y value to 0, 0, which will put his upper left-hand corner to the upper left-hand corner of the stage. And then his width and his height to 800 by 480. And that'll make him the perfect size for our stage. It's always easier to kind of go into his properties and do this than try to drag him to the right size. And of course, if you want to change this tablecloth, if red and white's not your thing, I don't mind. Okay, so I just put this for ease of use. All right. So we're going to keep that tablecloth on his own layer, and then we're going to put our other things on their own layers to kind of keep things nice and neat and make it easy on ourselves. So if you double click on the layer name, you'll be able to change it to our table, or tablecloth layer. Lock that layer so we're not editing the tablecloth anymore, and then add a new layer. So remember, you can hit the lock button on the table layer. And then the add a new layer button is that little white piece of paper that looks like it has an explosion sort of down here. So you add a new layer. And then we'll call this our pan layer. Because we're going to add our pan first. So step 1, we'll add our pan. And draw our pizza on it. Now the pan, I did make a movie clip. And the reason I made him a movie clip already is because I added a shadow to him. So I added a filter. And to add a filter to something, it had to be a movie clip. So that's why our pan ended up as a movie clip over there. So we'll drag our pan out to our tablecloth. If you wanted to make him bigger, you'd use your free transform tool up here on the right. Shortcut is the Q key on your keyboard. If you wanted to make him a little bit bigger or smaller. Remember our shortcut, if you hold down the shift key while you're making them bigger or smaller, it makes the height and width change proportionally to each other so it doesn't stretch out weird. And the way I made this pan is I just used some circle tools, you know, the oval tool, and created him with a little bit of shadow. We don't have to give him an instance name right now. Now we do want to add, and this is good practice for us to edit a movie clip object. We want to edit this movie clip object so that we could add the pizza. Now we can make the pizza separate, the actual dough part of the pizza. But this is good practice in editing a movie clip. Okay. So how do you edit a movie clip? If we wanted to edit him, we need to double click on him, right? So whenever you want to edit a movie clip object, you always double click on them and then you'll see that you're editing him up there in the top left-hand corner, remember? You'll see his name up there and you'll see him in the properties panel. Okay. So if you click on your properties panel, you should see that you are editing a group now, and that up here on the top left, you should see scene 1 pan. So that's, you always kind of double check there, remember? To make sure you're editing the right thing. All right, so let's add the dough. I'm going to add it with the oval tool. Okay. So remember the oval tool is grouped with the rectangle tool on the right. So you click on that little black arrow if your rectangle tool is showing to select the oval tool. And right now the color gray is my fill color. If you wanted a gray pizza, you could make it gray. Wouldn't be very edible looking, right? So I'm going to click on it and choose a more dough-like color. Okay. I don't mind what color you choose. You can even make a blue pizza. I don't mind. Okay. All right. But make sure you go ahead and change that, you know, that fill color. And then, of course, to draw out your oval, you can hold down the shift key to make a perfect circle. We can make a perfect pizza. And just kind of draw him. Ooh, and he did not show up because I think he is behind my pizza. So if that happened to you, I hit Control Z, and what happened is when I drew him, he ended up behind the pan. And one easy way to take care of this is just to make a new layer if you wanted to. Okay. So we can make a new layer to add him. Or you could right click on the pizza pan and tell it to go behind your oval. But I'm going to go ahead and click a new layer. If the new layer is on top, that means when I draw on this new layer, it'll end up on top of the pan and not underneath the pan. Click on my oval tool, I kind of draw my pizza. I'm in non-object drawing mode, but it doesn't matter that much what object drawing mode you're in. And remember that we'll just kind of draw them in there, and then if we ever wanted to edit them again, we would just double click on our pan to edit our pizza again. Let's make sure everybody gets there, so I'm going to pause this for a second. Okay. Now we'll go back to scene 1 since we're done editing our pan movie clip object. Okay, this was editing the pan movie clip object. We go back to our scene 1. Okay, he looks pretty okay. So let's lock that layer. That'll be our pan layer. And then we're going to make a new layer for our first ingredient. So if we get in the habit of locking our layers as we kind of finish them, then we won't accidentally edit them. So this is kind of a good step to remember. And then add a new layer. So hit that new layer button again. And it's good to work in layers because then we won't accidentally edit things we don't want to, and it's just easier to organize things. So double click on that layer. And we can call this layer our mushroom layer. And you know, as I'm doing this, I just realized we didn't put any sauce on our pizza. Do you guys want to put sauce on the pizza? No? Okay. But if you wanted to put sauce, you can add your sauce to your pizza after if you wanted to. You would just go back to that pan layer, unlock him, double click, and then add the sauce the same way as we added the dough, if you wanted that sauce to be on there. Okay? All right. But let's go ahead and get to editing or adding some mushrooms. Okay, so we're on a new layer, and we are actually going to use a spray can tool. So let me demo how the spray can tool works. So you guys don't have to do this part if you don't want to. And our spray can tool is over here, not there. Oh yeah, there he is. I knew he was in here. There he is, the spray brush tool. It's actually a really cool tool. So I'm going to demo first how it works if you guys have never seen the spray brush tool. But when you click on the spray brush, actually you guys can look at this, spray brush tool and its properties. So if you choose your spray brush tool, which is actually underneath the pencil, you click on the little brush and then you'll see the spray can. And notice that you can spray, and it says no symbol and edit. You can spray any type of movie clip object. Okay? So if I don't have anything inside of there, I go here to hit the spray can. Notice he sprays just black dots. So the default is just the spray pixels or spray, you know, the color of pixels that you have over there. That's the default. Okay? Your default shape is just a circle. But we can make it spray any kind of movie clip object. So we can spray on our mushrooms. Okay, I thought that was kind of fun. So in order to spray on our mushrooms, we're going to have to make our mushrooms into a movie clip object. So you can go over here to the library. And you'll see a mushroom ping, but you won't see a mushroom movie clip object. So we need to make our mushroom PNG into a movie clip object. So go ahead and drag your mushroom out to the stage. And then we'll make him into a movie clip object by hitting the F8 key. And we can name him Mushroom with a capital M. Because he is a movie clip object, we name our movie clip objects with capital letters. We can press OK. Now one thing I should do before I start spraying him on the pizza is he is rather large right now, and I would like him to be a little bit smaller. So let's edit that movie clip object we just made. How do you edit a movie clip object again? Double click it. Okay, we're practicing editing our movie clip objects. And then to scale him, we use that free transform tool. So whenever you want to scale something, use the free transform tool. And notice that I'm editing it inside of the movie clip object, so it's going to change all the movie clip objects to a little bit smaller. So remember to change the height and width together. You hold the shift key. And of course, when you're done, and then also, actually don't be done editing him. When you're done editing him, of course, you'll hit scene 1. But if you shrunk his size, and just note what I just did right there, and his his crosshair point is up there on the left. Go ahead and drag him up to his crosshair point, or go over to his properties. Either way, and choose 0, 0. So you can either drag him to his crosshair or hit 0, 0. That way, when we're adding him to the pizza, he's not, really large or off center. So we'll keep his upper left-hand corner at 0, 0. Okay. So we've successfully edited our mushroom movie clip object. And if you successfully edit him, then you're done editing him and you go back to scene 1. And remember, if you ever want to edit him again, you would just double click on him. So now we can delete him from the stage because we are going to add them as a group of mushroom objects with our spray can tool. So again, make sure you're on the right layer. Okay. Choose our spray can tool. And this time, we are going to edit what the spray can is going to spray by hitting that edit button. So remember, the default was just dots. In fact, you could add sauce that way with the dots. But we'll go ahead and add our mushrooms. So we'll hit the edit tool. And when we do that, it brings up both of our movie clip objects that we have inside of our library. If we had other movie clip objects, it'd bring them up. And we can choose that it's going to spray on mushrooms. Another thing that you could choose, so if you have your spray brush tool properties open, there's some choices we can use over here. We can check mark random scaling, so we can get different size mushrooms unless you want them all the same size. Okay, but if you wanted different size mushrooms, hit random scaling. You can choose random rotation, so the mushrooms will be randomly rotated on your pizza. It makes it look more realistic. They're not all perfectly straight. Unless you want the perfect pizza. But if you want it to be more random, you could check mark both of those choices right there. And then, of course, you would just go over to your pizza here, and you could hit the spray can tool. Now, you can either tap on the button, okay, or hold down the button, and he is doing a lot of mushrooms, but that's okay. Now, if you do something wrong or you don't like how it's coming out, you could hit Control Z. Okay. I just kind of tap on it because it does put a lot of mushrooms on there. And then if you'd rather have it more perfect, if you rather, just drag and drop your mushrooms, you could just drag them and drop them one at a time if you wanted to. Okay. Yeah. Or as I was saying, okay, here, let me just demo it. You don't have to do it this way, but if you would rather not use the spray can tool, I just thought it was kind of fun to use the spray can tool. But you could drag your mushroom objects one at a time out here. And then you would have to rotate each one. And then scale each one. Okay? Or you can do a Control C and a Control V. Okay? But pretty much we just want a big group of mushrooms. Okay? Of different sizes. Oops. So now you can see, if I do a Control A or I select them all, they're all different objects, right? They're all just kind of different objects. We're going to make them into one big object and then make them a movie clip, and then we'll add some animation to him. Okay? All right. So click anywhere and then hit Control A. Control A means select all. We use that one a lot. Alternatively, you could drag your mouse and select everything. And then do you remember the shortcut to group it together? We're going to group them into a little group. Control G will group them all together. That's always a good practice to make them into a group. And then we want to make him into a movie clip object. The reason we want to make our group of mushrooms into a movie clip object is because we want the group to fly in. Okay? So if you want it to act as one unit, and of course if we want to add an animation, we always make him a movie clip object. Okay, so we'll hit F8. And then I typically call it mushrooms with an S. But you could put mushroom group or mushroom topping. The only rule I would, really want to push is that you use a capital letter to name it. And now that he's a movie clip object, we can animate him. Yes. We made him a movie clip. I made him a movie clip first. Yes. Now, there's many ways that you could think how to make this work. Yes, question. It's what? Oh, student is our password. Oh, you should have told me a long time ago. Yeah, if you ever get stuck on something, yes, tell me. Yeah, you'll have to get caught up now. All right. So let's go ahead and move our mushrooms off of our stage. So after we've made them a movie clip object, let's take our mushrooms and we'll move them over here off of our stage. Because we're going to animate them to come into our stage. So we have to do a couple of things. We are going to add a tween to him and make it come into the stage. We're going to have to add some actions on our stage, or actions here, an actions layer to put stop, and then tell him to come in when we push the button. Okay, we're going to have to add the button. So we'll do it in steps here. But just so you know, this is kind of, what we do for the first step. So we move him off the stage and we'll just add a simple tween to him. So we should be getting better at adding tweens to our movie clips. Remember, Control minus to zoom out if you need to zoom out. And so to add a tween to a movie clip object, it has to be on his own layer, which he is. And how do we add a tween? Yes, right click. Okay. So you right click, tell it you want to create a motion tween. Now the back of our stage does look like it disappeared, and it did, but the reason is because our playhead went all the way out to frame 24, and you could see that our tablecloth and pan were only on frame 1, but this is easily fixable. This is what happens sometimes when we're making things in parts. You could just click and drag that all the way across, or even easier, you click on that frame underneath where your tween is ending, and you hit the F5 key, which adds a frame. So I just clicked on that layer. I clicked in the frame where I wanted that frame to extend to, and F5 just means a regular frame, not a keyframe. F6 was add a keyframe. F5 means just add a regular frame. So then our tablecloth and our pan will be on all the frames. Question?
When I created the motion tween, it added another layer.
It might have added that other layer if your mushrooms weren't on their own layer. Maybe. But the tween always has to be on its own layer.
Yes.
Oh, it's because this single mushroom was on that layer, so he couldn't add him. So you could actually just delete that layer if you hit that trash can. Okay. Okay. Good. All right. All right, so now we'd like to, work on our tween layer. Another good rule of thumb is just make sure, well, it won't let you edit these other layers anyway, but just make sure those layers are locked. It's always kind of good. All right. So we'll, on our tween layer in frame 1, we see a keyframe. That's where he's starting. He started outside the stage. And so on our last frame, we want him to end up on the pizza. So we can move our playhead or click on the last frame, drag our mushrooms into the pizza, and notice that if we scrub the playhead now, he just flies straight in. Which is a little boring. We can make him, fly a little bit different. So we haven't done this before. Maybe you kind of played around with it when we were making our car. But you can make that tween so that he kind of moves up and around or makes an arc instead. And an easy way to do that is if you hover your mouse so that he's pointing to that tween line. And you see on the mouse it makes like a sideways happy face or curve. When he has that symbol, if you click and move, or click and hold down the left mouse button and move that tween, it'll make it into an arced tween. So he'll move a little bit. Yeah. So then he'll move more like in an arc, which makes it a little bit more visually pleasing. So then he's kind of flying in there. I'll let you guys play around with that. And then if you wanted it to rotate as he's flying in, remember how we made the wheels rotate? So to make a tween rotate, remember you click on the tween itself. So you click on the blue part in the timeline, that's the tween. And you go over to its properties. And you could tell him to rotate if you want. Remember you just click on the rotate and you can tell it to rotate 1 or 2 times. So now you kind of twirling in there like we're throwing the mushrooms on. Kind of play with our tweens a little bit. All right. Now if you hit Control Enter, it will play. And it'll play the default way where it just keeps looping on the main stage and he'll just keep flying in and flying in and flying in, which is not exactly what we want, but you should see that. Okay? And it's a good time to test it. So remember that when it gets to frame 24, it loops back to frame 1, so it looks like the mushrooms disappear because on frame 1 they're off the stage again, right? So you kind of realize what's going on there, how he's continuously playing. So now here's where we get to add our button first. We'll add our button, and then we can add our code to our button to tell it when the mushroom should fly in. So we have to control things with our action script code. Okay, that's where we add the intelligence of our program. All right. Okay, I'm assuming everyone had success there. Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and lock that layer. And we'll make another layer for our button. So if we lock that layer, we can be sure not to change it. We'll add a new layer. We'll call it our mushroom button, our mush button. Something to that effect. Our M button, mushroom button. All right, so I usually make the button out of one instance of our ingredient. So I usually take a mushroom and drag it to the stage, and that could be our button. Alternatively, you could make a rectangle button. Okay, but I usually just drag an instance here of our mushroom to the stage. So I went over to my library here. I clicked on that mushroom movie clip object, not the mushrooms, but just single mushroom, and dragged him to the stage. And I'm going to go over to his properties, and I'm going to name him an instance name so that I can call him in my code. Remember that instance names are typically lowercase because it is like a variable. And I just called him Mush Button. You could call him Mushroom Button if you'd rather call him Mushroom Button. Just remember what you named him is what you're going to write in your code when you want to access him. Okay, so remember that to access our movie clips in our code, we have to give them an instance name. Okay. In fact, we forgot to give our group of mushrooms an instance name. Yeah, we need to give him an instance name too. So if you want to do that now, you can, or I guess we can do that. I'm going to unlock that layer and just give him an instance name too right now. And I click on him. So if you click just on the mushrooms, that big group of mushrooms, I'm going to give him the instance name mushrooms with a lowercase m. And if you don't get this part, I'll come around and help you make sure we get our instance names. But we do want to give them both instance names. So we got Mush Button and Mushrooms. All right, so the stage is set. Now we need to add our action script code. Remember that when we're adding our action script code, we do want to add it on its own layer. So to make sure you're not going to add the action script code accidentally to the other layers, you can lock them all. And then add a new layer. If it added the new layer anywhere except the top, make sure you click and drag on that layer to the top, because we always put our actions on the topmost layer. That's a good rule of thumb that we use. We usually name that layer Actions Layer or A Layer. You name it the A Layer or call it the Actions Layer. Okay, when you look at Code Online, that's what they always name it. It's kind of a standard. So if you're lost, just get caught up right here. Just add it. You know, if you got lost with the instance names, we'll get you caught up with that. But make sure, you know, this part here, this is the important part of this class, the actual coding part. So add a new layer. Call it the A layer. Make sure, you know, your other layers are locked right now and that you're on that A layer so that we can add our actions. Now remember that when we're adding actions so far, we haven't moved on to separate files yet, so we're still adding actions to the timeline. We're going to add it right to our actions panel here. So if we click on the actions panel, if it's not open, remember that you have to go to Window and choose Actions right here to make it show up if he's not already docked at the bottom. And that's your F9 key is your shortcut to open up the Actions panel. Now what do we want action to happen first? Let's think. What's our algorithm here? Well, we want it not to keep playing, obviously, right? So do you remember the command to make it stop playing? Stop. Okay. So obviously we're going to tell him to stop it first. So that'll stop all the actions from happening at first. Okay. So everything will be just stopped. He's waiting for us to tell him to go again. Okay. Now we only want it to play again when we click the button, or when we click on the mushroom. So what do we need to add to the mushroom? Yeah, an event listener. Okay, very good. Yeah, we need to add an event listener to him. And if we want to kind of do it the easy way and have it kind of type the code for us a little bit, we could have it type the code for us with our code snippets. Okay. So I just made my actions panel a little bit smaller so I could click on my mushroom object. Oh, and I locked my layer with my mushroom object, so I will have to unlock his layer here. So I'm going to unlock his layer just so I can click on the mush button. I'm going to go to my code snippets panel. Alternatively, I could type this out myself, right? But sometimes it's easier if we just use our code snippets sometimes. Now he is going to probably not put him on the right layer, this code, but that's okay. Now to add a code snippet to an object, you have to click on the object, and then you'll go to your code snippets panel. And the mouse click event is inside of the event handlers folder there. So if I double click on my mouse click event, okay, it does actually type out the mouse click event code. You can see that code that it typed out there for me. It did add it on the wrong layer, so you know, it is a computer program, so it's told itself that it needs to put it here. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this code and then delete that layer. Okay, we just kind of use that code snippets to help us type it out. But you can select that code that it made. And like alternatively, we could have typed it out ourselves. Remember that too. Control-C or copy it. I'll go ahead and delete that layer. Come back here to my A layer where I'm typing my code. And then do a Control-V or paste it in there. Alright, I'll wait a couple minutes for everyone to get caught up there. But you should see some code like this. Now if that didn't work out for you, you could just type it in there too, and it's good to type some things. But notice what it did. So this is our instance name of our mush button, right? If you named it mushroom button, you'll see his instance name. So we always start with the instance name when we want to add an event listener to an object. And so we put the add event listener method or function. That's our function. Remember that function? Event listeners always take in 2 arguments. What they're listening for and what to do when they hear it. Okay. So he's listening for the mouse event click. So when something clicks on him, which will turn into a tap on our ePads. And then he calls this function that he called FL mouse click handler, and I'm going to change the name of that. I usually do. So I'm going to get rid of the FL underscore. And I'm just going to name him mouse click handler. And notice I changed the capital M to a lowercase m because our functions should start with lowercase letters. That's a good standard practice. Now since I changed it up there, I do need to change it down here too so that they match. Remember that when he hears it, he's going to call that function, so this function has to be named the same. Right now he's just going to do a trace event, so we could test him out right now if he wanted to, and he would just trace mouse clicked. So remember in the output he would just output mouse clicked. Now I did put in these extra comments for us. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and delete those extra comments. And so what are we going to tell it to do when he clicks the mushrooms? Yeah, we're going to tell them to go to and play, right? So when they click, we're going to say go to and play. And actually we did not add an internal timeline. try this out here. We're going to save him, and then you can test him out. Oh, and then what did we forget to do? So he went and played it, and then he disappeared. And why did he disappear? Because he goes back to frame 1. What did we forget to do? Yeah, we forgot to stop our mushrooms. We're going to have to edit him a little bit, though. But that's okay. We'll get some more practice here. And the reason being is, notice that we didn't add the mushrooms to their own internal timeline, and when we did that, we can't tell them to play on their own internal timeline. And when we did that, we can't add other ingredients and have them play separately. So we're going to have to do a little bit of editing here, but that's okay, right? We like to edit things. It's good practice for us. So did most people get that to work though? That part there. And we're gonna change them up a little bit. So if you didn't get that part to work, still work along with me, okay? Because we can still do this part together. So I'm gonna make my actions panel a little bit slower. Or not slower, lower. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these mushrooms off of this main timeline and we're going to add them to their own internal timeline. And you can kind of see the issue that we're having here is that when we add more ingredients, we don't want it to keep playing everything from this main timeline. We do need to add them to his own internal timeline. In my videos online, I did put it on their internal timeline. Okay. So we didn't do this extra step. But let's go ahead and what we're going to do is we're going to take that mushrooms layer and we're actually going to delete him, and then we're going to remake him in his own internal timeline. Okay? So click on your mushrooms layer, hit delete. Go over to your library. Actually, I think it'll make more sense if we have the pan there in the background. So take that mushrooms object, drag him out here to the stage, and you'll need to be on a layer that's not locked. So if you, we might have to make a new layer here. Let's make a new layer since I deleted my old layer. Make a new layer. So we'll do this twice. We'll add our mushrooms and then I'll help you add one more ingredient and then you guys will be in charge of the last ingredient. Okay? So make sure you're on a layer here that's kind of blank. Go ahead and drag your mushrooms over here to the stage. Put them off to the right here somewhere in the gray part. And now double click on your mushroom group. So that we're editing inside of his timeline. And then F8 him and make him an inner mushrooms object. So that we can add some animation to him. So I usually just put the word inner in front of their name that I gave them previously. So I put capital I, the word inner, and then mushrooms, with a capital M. All right, then we get some more practice in adding our tween. So remember what we do when we added our tween? We right clicked and added our motion tween, create motion tween. We dragged him to where he wanted to end up. And then added a little bend to my motion tween. I went to the properties for my motion tween and told it to rotate. And then I'm going to add a new layer and add an action here to tell it to stop on frame 1, and then that's all we have to do to this guy. Okay? We can go and, so I always add my actions on a new layer, remember that rule. Hit a new layer. Call it the A layer. Tell it an action to stop. Remember, it's S-T-O-P, parenthesis, parenthesis, and then don't forget that semicolon. That's good program. Since we're in here, I was going to do this as another step after, but I guess we can do it right now also. Now when we go and tell it to play in our code, we could just say, hey, go to and play frame 2. No big deal. We're writing the number 2 in there. Okay. But as a good kind of programming practice, a lot of times we don't want to write like actual frame numbers. You know, because later on we might want to add some animation in front of him, or we might change it up a little bit. And so it's actually kind of a standard to name a frame an actual name and not just go by numbers. And we can name our frames. So if we want to add another layer, yes, another layer. We have our tween layer, we have our A layer. I'm going to make sure that the A layer stays on top. So if it made the new layer on top, you can click and drag the new layer down. Always make sure your actions layer is on top. And on that layer, on frame 2, so if you want to name an actual frame, I'm naming this frame, I'm giving him a name. So I click on frame 2, and in his properties it says, hey, name that frame. You can name him something. See how you can name the frame? Now in order to name a frame though, before you name him, you have to make sure it's a keyframe. So he has to have a circle on him to name him. So if you already named him, Control Z and undo it. Make sure we're going to put a keyframe in there, so hit the F6 key to make sure that he is a keyframe before we name him. So that way he doesn't get mixed up with frame 1. So we're going to name that frame 2, that keyframe. We can name it the, well, what should we name him? Play frame, because that's where we want to start playing from. Now when I do that and I click off of him, you'll see down in the timeline that he gives him that name. You see how it put a little red kind of arrow or triangle, sideways triangle here? And then it wrote the word play. That way you could see the name of that frame, which is actually a better way to kind of program. So name our frames and not just put the number 2. All right, so just kind of a review in case you got a little bit behind. We do have our layer here with our mushrooms with the tween. Just kind of double check that you got things set up right. So our bottom layer was our mushrooms with our tween. Our second layer was just a name layer. We're just naming frame 2, play. And then in our top layer, we have our actions. And the only action that we put on this timeline is in frame 1. We told it to stop. Our mushrooms are ready to go. And then when we make more ingredients, that's how we're going to set it up. Same exact way, all the other ingredients. So let's go back to scene 1. He looks a lot better now. Click on your group of mushrooms. Let's give him an instance name. I know we named him before, but then we had to delete him. So we do have to give him an instance name. So click on the group of mushrooms in his properties panel. Give him the instance name mushrooms with a lowercase m. It's kind of good to redo things. We're remembering better now, right? Anyways. Awesome. Okay, then in our actions here, so in order to see your actions, open your actions panel, and then you do have to click on that frame where the A is, so to see our actions. And here's our actions we added. So now, since he has his own internal timeline, we're going to tell that object to go to his internal timeline by writing his name. And then the dot operator and go to and play. So that tells it, hey, go to your timeline, go to and play. We could leave the number 2 there and it would work. But since we gave it that frame label, a better way to program is not to hard code numbers in there, but just to put the name of that frame that we gave it. So if you named it play, you put play in quotation marks. If you named it something else, you put its name in quotation marks. And that's the same thing as, hey, go to frame 2. Works kind of like how domain names. Domain names are IP addresses, right? But we like writing www.mccd.edu and not the IP address. The same thing. Okay, it's just like a code name for that frame. So now if you save it and you hit run, everything is stopped because we told it on frame 1 to stop. The button does have an event listener because we told you the button to have an event listener. And when you click it, you should run that function mouse event handler. Oh. And he does actually play, and he does exactly what we told him to do. And this is good that he disappeared though, so why did he disappear? I think, why did he disappear? For the same reason that he disappeared previously. On his internal timeline, he goes to and plays. And when he gets to the end, he loops around back to frame 1. And frame 1 told it to stop again. So we actually did exactly what we told him to. So that's great if that worked like that. But we don't want it to work exactly like this. We do want it to stop on the end of his timeline. So that's what we need to do. If you thought, that, hey, that's what I need to do, great. That means you're figuring this stuff out. So what do we need to do? We need to double click on our mushrooms to get back to his internal timeline. And we needed to add a stop right here. Okay? So remember to be on your actions layer. Now before you go in there and hit stop, this has to be a keyframe. So to add actions to any frame, it has to be a keyframe. Okay, that's starting to realize, hey, keyframes and movie clips, that's the kind of the main thing in Flash here, right? All right. So make sure you're on the end of your timeline. Hit the F6 key, so you're down here in that frame. Hit the F6 key to make him into a keyframe. You'll get that little circle that says, hey, I'm a keyframe. Then you go to your actions panel, and you write stop again. So he'll stop on frame 1. He'll wait for our code to say, hey, go to the play frame or frame 2. He'll play. And then when he gets to the end, he'll stop again, but he'll stop with the mushrooms actually staying there, not going back to frame 1. He'll stop on that last frame. Hopefully this is starting to make good sense to you how we're doing these. So save him and then test him again, of course. And now when he flies in, because we told him to stop at the end there, he does actually stop. Which works just like we wanted it to. So should we add another ingredient? Let's add another one because we'll go through the steps again. Okay, let's add one more ingredient here. And then I'm going to have you guys add an ingredient on your own. So if you didn't get this completely to work, it's okay. Let's do it again. Okay, when we do it again, you might figure out, oh, that's why I didn't get the other one to work. Okay, maybe you can figure it out yourself here. Okay. But let's add a pepperoni. Let's do our steps a little bit better this time. All right, so we're going to add a pepperoni object here. So you remember step one was we actually made a new layer. So let's make a new layer for our pepperonis, and you could lock the other layers. If I lock all the other layers and only unlock my pepperoni layer, and I can call him pepperonis if I wanted to. It's always good to kind of work on a new layer when you're adding some objects. Now if I wanted to use the spray can tool again and add a whole bunch of pepperonis at once, I'll have to make him into a movie clip object. So let's drag our pepperoni ping to the stage, PNG file. He's a giant pepperoni. And notice I did lift him, so he does have like a little watermark on him. Our steps before is we made him into a movie clip object, and then we resized him. You can alternatively resize him now and then make him a movie clip object. Okay. So if we wanted to resize him first, we can click on the free transform tool. Hit the shift key and resize him first to the right size. And then we'll hit F8 and make him into a movie clip. So drag a pepperoni to your stage. Make it a little bit smaller with our free transform tool, and then F8 him. And name him pepperoni. He's a single pepperoni, so I'm not going to put the S on there. I'm just going to name him pepperoni. And then I can delete him from the stage. Remember, deleting him from the stage does not delete him from my library. I can still see my pepperoni in my library. And now I can use my spray can tool. If I want to use my spray can tool again. So your spray can tool is there on the right. And you can click on the edit. Notice it's spraying mushrooms still. It says spray mushrooms. So you can click on that edit button to tell it to spray pepperonis instead. Because I still had random scaling, it does make small and large pepperonis. If you wanted them all to be the same size, because maybe pepperonis aren't small like that, remember that you can click random scaling there, unclick or uncheck random scaling. You can kind of play around with the buttons in there if you want. All right. Where is it? Okay, so just get some pepperonis in there. I'm taking too long to put my pepperonis on there. Remember, we want to group them as a single group. Remember, alternatively, you could just drag some pepperonis one at a time. It'll do the same thing here. And then we do a Control A, or you click and drag over your pepperonis and select all of them so that they're all selected. And then we group them together with Control G. So you should see a blue box around all of them as a group. And then we F8 or make them into a movie clip. And we'll name them pepperonis with an S because now it's a group of them. Cool. Now we just need to animate them the same way that we internally animated the mushrooms. So we're going to add the same type of animation onto our pepperonis. So I'm going to click and drag them over here so I can make their animation look correct. And you can have them on top of the mushrooms or over here. It doesn't really matter all that much. If you want them to fly in from a different angle, put them somewhere else on the stage. And then, of course, we're going to double click on them because we don't want to make the mistake again of adding it to the main timeline. Remember why that didn't work? Okay, we actually figured out why that didn't work, right? So we'll double click on our pepperonis to make their internal timeline look like the mushroom timeline. We're going to do the same algorithm in here. Same steps, the same rules. So first things first, we'll make them into an internal movie clip object so we can animate them. We'll call it inner pepperonis. So just make sure you're in scene 1, you're inside the pepperoni. Always make sure up there on the top left that you're in the right place. Okay, you're in his timeline. You can hit F8 then and call it inner pepperonis. And remember why we're doing this? We have to make him an internal movie clip so that we can add some animation to his timeline. Once he's a movie clip, we can now add a motion tween to him by right-clicking on him, creating a motion tween. We should be kind of okay, pretty good at making motion tweens now. Remember when we create a motion tween, it adds the blue motion tween to the timeline. We use our playhead to drag to the end of the timeline and make the pepperonis fly in. At that point, it puts that keyframe there. We can then use our mouse to drag that tween if you'd rather have it kind of arc in. And then again, if you want it to rotate, you click on the blue tween and tell it in the properties of that motion tween to rotate. Now we just need to add the logic. So we've added our tween. Now we just need to add some stops to our timeline so he'll stop and play in the right place. So you can lock that layer if you want. And add a new layer. We're going to add 2 new layers. So you can add them both now if you want. Remember, one's going to be our layer names layer, and the other layer will be our A layer. So you can name this guy the A layer. I usually name the labels layer labels. So it doesn't matter what order you kind of do this in, but pretty much what we want to do is put a stop on frame 1, a stop on frame 24. So remember that those both have to be keyframes, and I'll do it with you, but I'm just kind of telling you. Maybe you could figure it out. And then on frame 2, on the labels layer, we have to make it a keyframe and name that the play layer. So I'll start with my actions. So if you want to follow along with me, that's fine. So on that layer, A layer on frame 1, make sure you're on frame 1 on the A layer. On your actions panel, you'd write stop, and that'll add stop to that. Frame 1, STOP, parenthesis, parenthesis, semicolon. And then you can go to frame 24. Since we have our actions panel open, I might as well put that stop on frame 24. So remember to label 24, that last frame. I have to hit F6 on my shortcuts to add a keyframe. Remember, you can only add actions to a keyframe. So you'll know it's a keyframe when it has the circle, of course. And I'll add a stop on that last frame. Those are both in my actions layer. So make sure it says an A in both of them. Alrighty. And then in frame 2, on my labels layer, I can hit F6 again to make it a keyframe. Go over to the properties of that frame and call it play. I'm going to use a lowercase letter for the play. And you should on your timeline then see his name appear right there. So if you did it right, you should see an A here, and the word play right there. Okay? On your keyframes there. So you have your tween layer, you have your labels layer, you have your actions layer, and your actions layer has 2 keyframes telling it to stop in the beginning and stop at the end, of course. All right. So then our pepperonis are all set up ready to go on their internal timeline. They look just like the mushrooms timeline. So then our last step, of course, is just to add a mushroom button to our stage and add some logic to it. All right, so I move back to scene 1 because I'm going to add my mushroom button to my stage and tell it to listen, add event listener to my pepperoni button to listen for when the pepperoni is clicked to make our pepperonis fly in. So with my pepperoni selected, let's give them an instance name. So your group of pepperonis here, give them the instance name pepperonis. Remember, that'll come into importance when we're calling him in our code. Now let's add our button. Now to add the button, I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer for my pepperoni button. And yes, we will have a lot of layers down here when we're finished. Go ahead and grab an instance of my pepperoni movie clip. I'm going to grab an instance of him. So I'm clicking and dragging on one single pepperoni, not pepperoni, it's just pepperoni with 1. I'm going to drag him to the stage right here. And I'm going to, let's see here. I need to give him an instance name so that I can call him in my code. So So with your little pepperoni guy that you pulled out here, let's give him an instance name in his properties panel. I'm going to name him Pep Button. You can name him Pepperoni Button. But I figured since I named the other one Mush Button, I'll name him Pep Button. And you usually give him a lowercase name letter for his first name. So. Or his instance name. Now I'm going to add to my code. So this is my main timeline code. My main timeline code is in frame 1 here. So remember, if your code doesn't appear in your actions panel, to click down here inside that frame to see your code appear. And I can copy and paste this code. So I can Control C and copy it. Control V and paste it. So I have my mushroom code, and now I'm going to change this so that it works for a pepperoni. So I only have to change a couple of things. Instead of Mush Button, he's now going to be called Pep Button, because that's what I named him. And we can't have two functions with the same name, because it's not going to like that. He'll get confused. So I'm going to call this guy Mouse Click Handler number 2. So I changed his name here. I just put a number 2 at the end. Alternatively, you could name these completely different names, like, you know, I don't know, Pep Click Handler or something. But I just put a number 2 at the end. So then again, I have to put the number 2 here, because remember that the function it calls the same name, I gotta have them match. And then the only thing I have to change in here is just tell it, hey, pepperonis go to and play. And voila, he should work. Okay. If you get compiler errors, you can, you know, fix them. But your 2 buttons should actually go to and play.
To change how they're stacking on each other.
Yes,
you would
I
just
know.
go to layers, right?
I'm remembering. I have to remember how to do that. So I'm gonna hit pause on